Welcome to CTO Think, a podcast about leadership, product development, and tech decisions between two recovering chief technology officers. Here are your hosts, Don Vandemark and Randy Burgess.
Hey, Randy, what's going on this week?
Hey, Don. We recorded an episode of our other app, This Old App, and the joke was this episode is sponsored by Randy's Job Search. And
so guess what this episode's sponsored by?
Randy's Job Search. Randy's
exactly.
Job Search is funding 2 episodes across 2 different podcasts. So I'm in the job market. I've been working with a client for the last, 3 to 4 years, and they have shut down funding on future work on an app. It doesn't need any new features, essentially, for what they're doing. So I'm in the process of looking for a new landing spot. So if anyone's out there listening and you think that I could work with you and your team, give me a holler. But what has been interesting, I think, is the themes of all the people I'm talking to across the board when they talk about the tools they use. Yeah. And I would say the last time I was really looking in the job market was about 10 years ago. I've never really gone through a whole lot of job applications and stuff because I was in Chicago and I just had connections and all that good stuff. But I'm in Kansas City and I don't know even close as many people. And so I'm on the remote job search now. And the one thing that's standing out the most is that everyone talks about their continuous integration and deployment system now. And that was never a topic that was discussed a decade ago. At least on the, I don't know if it's about being proud of the system or it's CI, continuous integration and deployment is now an expected quality control and workflow mechanism that I just think all mature companies have subscribed to over the last decade. And it's becoming very apparent. And so that's what we're kind of talking about today is continuous integration. Why is it important? What do we use? What do we have to learn? All that good stuff. So
yeah, and this one came out. I had been talking to someone, and it brought up an all-nighter I pulled once. And this is a little different because this was a very last minute throw it together sort of thing to where, the CI and the CD didn't really probably were not the right thing to do in this instance. But the backstory is, are you familiar with Hank Green and John Green?
No.
They are brothers who probably 10 years ago did a vlog series called Brotherhood 2.0 where they just talked to each other through video diaries for a year. That's the only way they talk to each other. Now, John is a young adult author, a famous young adult author, Fault in Our Stars, Looking for Alaska. Yeah. Other ones that I've read them all, but I can't come up with any others at the moment. And then Hank has really dove into the video side of it and is, I believe, the backer, the creator of VidCon, which is about about doing business on YouTube and things like that. So anyway, at once a year they've got something they call the Project for Awesome, which is a nonprofit where they try and raise money. Mm-hmm. And this was back in their early days. And one day Hank had put out to the world that he was looking for somebody to put together a website to take on the donations. And it was just going to be PayPal links and things like that. And I was like, Well, I wouldn't mind helping. So I let him know that I wouldn't mind helping. Um, and this was probably 4 months before the actual event. I didn't hear anything. And this is my recollection of the story. It may have gone differently um, until about a month beforehand. Um, Not even a month. It felt like it was a couple weeks. When someone he finally reached out to me and said, "Hey, can you put this together?" And this was at a time when I was in Drupal, and I was like, "Yeah, I could probably get Drupal to do this, and just build a page that had different one box for each item that they were um, selling." In order to donate to, as long as it's all PayPal links, as long as I don't have to, do a whole credit card processing side,
Yeah.
it was just PayPal, then it was okay. I actually got it up. I got it working. It looked fine. I'm not a designer. It looked okay. It was utilitarian, but it worked. However, it did not handle the load.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first real dive into caching and figuring out how to handle load. What I actually ended up doing to save it so that it would work for this 1 day event, I ended up just taking each page, taking all the HTML, and just putting the HTML up on the server instead of serving it through Drupal. And just having it serve static sites, static pages instead.
Yeah.
Which worked. But again, wasn't great. I was literally up all night just getting that to work. So that's what kind of brought this whole topic up of what disasters have we had, and what's the climate like today. And as you said, the climate today is continuous integration, continuous development. And over on the Aspire EDU side, that's something we go down. We go down that path of continuous. We've been that way from probably the beginning almost. My guys will push things in the middle of the day, just because we've got our system set up to where it's not really going to interrupt the flow of anything.
But what does CI mean to you? Like, define it.
What does continuous integration mean to me? Okay, so continuous integration to me is the ability to take the code, run it through some tests as you're hitting the deploy point, run it through tests to make sure you're not causing any further problems, and wrapping it into the master branch. What does it mean to you?
Well, for me, it means a process that your team has, one with source control. When you write code amongst many people, amongst many features and many stages of development, at the dev level, development level, how do you manage that code? So you mentioned master branch, and many companies work with this idea of a pristine master branch that nothing is merged in there that doesn't pass all the tests on a branch level. So that also now brings in the idea of tests. So you've got source control, and now you've also built an automated test system of some kind. Could be unit tests, could be integration tests, but your team has to write that code that kind of sits alongside, is parallel to the actual code base itself. And then once you commit code to the source control system, again, that's usually Git. I don't know anybody. I've yet to talk to anybody in a blue moon that uses SVM or whatever the heck that old stuff was. So usually with Git, you commit your changes to a branch. That branch then runs on a continuous integration server. So there's a server out there that monitors your Git repos. And when a commit is made, it basically grabs that code and then builds up a server and runs the entire app with its test on that standalone server instance. If it passes, you get the all thumbs up from that CI server. This could be like CodeShip, CI Circle, Travis, Jenkins, any of these things. But the idea is you are taking the entire code base and actually building it and making it so that it would be a standalone representation of the app, and then running the tests against that so that you can know that, hey, this branch, this version of my code, of our team's code, is still passing tests. But it's not on your local dev machine that's doing the test, and it's not on production that's doing the test.
Right.
And then from there, and this is where it gets trickier about what companies do, but even from there, then if everything passes on the branch, a choice has to be made at the dev level. Do we merge this into master? So then you merge that into the master branch, and that deploys. When a commit is made to master, that deploys to then a staging server. So this is not like the Circle CI, the server instance that built up. This is an actual, in a way, a mirror to the production side that allows you to push master and deploy it just as if it was production. And then you could have a level of testing around that. It could be QA, like people that go in and test features. It could be the end-to-end testing, like a Cypress or a Nightwatch or a Selenium, that actually goes in and acts like a human and hammers the app on various features to make sure things are working. It could be just a normal quality control where, hey, this is the feature the marketing department wanted. The marketing department can go and hit staging and check this feature out. So,
right.
But then at that point, a choice is made to push staging to production. And I know that there are some firms that just have it happen every couple hours. Like, it doesn't even matter if there's a change. They continually just copy staging to production, which is a little weird to me, but I know a company that did it because they're just like, we routinely know that if it reaches staging and it's got the green light, that it can be copied over. And I've never trusted that. Like, I want to know exactly when I'm pushed to production. But the bigger point is, at every stage of this process, you have, like, there's deltas about changes that have been made. And you can go in and reverse from any point in that process. The staging server could be reverted back to a previous Git version. The database would have a backup on the staging server, as well as production has a backup of data on its server, or wherever your data is hosted. And so you can revert back to previous versions of the database. But the idea is that there's all of these various stages of safety and quality checks and testing, so that every incremental change you make will alarm you as to if there are problems, versus the way that we used to do it before, the way that I was introduced to it, which is write some code to a file, test it locally on your computer. Now, FTP that file up to the production server, and then go and test it, refresh the page on the production server.
And pray.
Every time. Regardless of if you're an atheist, even or you speak to a God that doesn't accept prayers, you still pray. So, and that's truly, like, when I started out, I had no idea what a deployment system was. We never even teach CI to the boot camp students because we don't have that much time. They know the part of CI of source control. They learn Git from week one, but we don't ever get them into the setup of Circle CI or Jenkins or anything, of CodeShip or whatever. I kind of touched on Heroku pipelines because I found that to be kind of easy to discuss, but none of my students wanted to add that layer of complexity. And so back in the day when we started out, it truly was edit a file and somehow push it up to the production server directly. I didn't have staging, didn't have that luxury, didn't have a team that taught me how to do better. It wasn't until I got to Vibes Media when I had to work with the engineering team's servers. They're like, you can't just push this stuff to our server. You got to push it through Git. I'm like, oh, okay, let me learn how to do that. So, I mean, that was a good decade or more ago. But that's been my experience. Or my experience was from the dreadful upload and pray versus I will be shocked if a problem gets pushed to production with all the layers of control we have around this stuff now. And I mean, it's a much. I mean, I hated deployments. By the time you got to a mature app with a lot of stuff without tests, I hated doing deployments. Yeah. I was like, what's going to break now? And now companies brag about the level of change that they're able to deploy daily to their apps.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that makes, I mean, and think about, I don't know about your phone because you use Android, but on my phone, I get updated apps. If I wait a week, I have 100 updates to make. Because companies are able to, because they have another layer of protection on the app stores, because those stores like Apple and Google at least have some kind of quality checks that they make the people follow after they've gone through the process. But you can now tell, like back in the day, I remember I would get maybe 20 to 30 a month of app updates. And now on a weekly basis, I see hundreds. And I think the difference is not that I've downloaded more apps, which is definitely the case, but it's much more about all of these teams are making fearless changes on a much more rapid basis. And so their quality and their deployments are faster and quicker. That's my guess on it.
Yeah. It's just becoming part of the thing, right? It's the fact that everybody, you say you don't teach it, but it's part of the process. And as that becomes more and more the default, people get better at it and are more comfortable with it. I know back in when, this was, I guess, right when we first started to know each other, I was doing some work for Fantasy Asylum, which was a fantasy sports website. And it was very much that of, oh, we need this change made to this feature. Okay, we think it works okay on staging. Let's push it. And then, 1 out of every 3 times you have to roll it back or you have to put in a hot fix for something you missed. So it's a lot easier nowadays with that continuous integration for sure.
So
just the mindset alone.
I mean, what tools do you all use at Aspire EDU?
To be honest, I'd have to go look. We have a let me pull up the Slack channel here, because we've got things that when we push, it automatically does the checks, and it does the see, they've got it all hidden back behind in Heroku, so I couldn't tell you exactly what tools we're using. But we do have a we do have CI running that's running all our tests. We do have code COV that's doing code coverage, but that's not testing.
It's a quality check. It's a report.
It's a quality check, but that's really more quality check of the
Yeah.
test itself, not of the change. But I think that might be the quote app or the Slack user that reports some of the testing as well.
So, how much do you stress about deployments these days with Aspire EDU?
Oh, I don't at all, because history we've not. We have. I'm not even going to say we haven't taken this, or I don't want to jinx it. But the tests that we've written are robust enough to catch just about everything that's going on. The only issue we run into sometimes is we've got our our non-Australian code on Heroku and our Australian code on Convox, which is a Heroku clone that you can run on servers. And the reason we did that was for Australian data laws. We couldn't run Heroku in Australia because they didn't have a server at the time that was based in Australia. So sometimes we'll get a little disconnect between those two, but not often, because when we push, it pushes to both of them. In that case, it's sometimes just a failed automation. But I don't stress about deployments at all. The only time we've gotten a little that I was a little nervous was when we split up the databases a few months ago, because at the end of the day, you can't test that.
No, it'd be hard, very hard.
Not to where you're going to be comfortable. And that was a case of we split our database into 3. And at the end of the day, it worked fine. And I was always okay, because I knew if we had to, we could switch it all back to the main one and work with any changes. But that was the most nervous I've been, and that worked.
Well,
that worked well. We didn't have any issues with that either.
Do devil's advocate on that one. Like, why couldn't you have created a third staging environment with a 3 database model and ran that for a week?
We could have. To me, I'm not sure I would have been convinced it was a good enough test for the effort involved.
Well, you had to do it from production. Would have been.
And it's not like we didn't do exactly that. We did create a staging environment to where we split the database in 3, ran our code against it. We just didn't run it for a week.
No.
We ran it for a few days.
The time is arbitrary, but
yeah. But we did run it. We did go ahead and split it. We ran our nightly retrievals against it. What we don't have the ability to do is have the end user hit it. And that's the last piece that we just kind of had to let it go out into the wild and go with. We had done as we had spent weeks checking and double checking, just because we knew how critical a change this was. But that doesn't mean you're not nervous about it.
So you have a Slack channel for feedback from your CI process.
We actually have a couple Slack channels. One for pushes to GitHub. That's just anytime anything gets pushed to GitHub, it
how numb are you to those channels now?
And then I'm very numb. Well, let me put it this way. The pushes channel, I'm fairly numb to, but I will review it just because that's also how I see new issues that the CEO has put in there. That's where she logs issues, is within GitHub. And so this catches new issues being opened as well. So it's a way for me to stay on top of everything she's seeing. The deploy channel, I'm very numb to. In my Slack usage for Aspire EDU, I look at all the all unreads choice, which just shows you all the different unread messages you have, and I usually have 5 or 6 that I have to go through. But I still read through everything. I just don't look immediately upon alert on anything. The only thing I'll look immediately on alert on is we have a situation channel, and that's where all our errors will go to. All our significant errors will go to. And so when that alerts, then I'll look and be like, oh yeah, we know what that one is. Or usually about 3/4 of the time something pings there, somebody will pipe up and say, that was me. Whether it was a bad entry they had done on testing something or what it was. It's usually not a actual big problem. It's just we have the threshold low enough that it's catching little stuff too.
I mean, I have on apps that I've been on teams and apps I've built lately, we've attached the code like prettier level linting checks to our CI.
Yeah.
So that it's like your code may work, but if you don't run the lint on your system, you have too many spaces after the end of a line. Like that's why I like prettier now, and we have that debate before, but prettier is a process of continuous integration as well on your desktop. But if you don't have prettier and you have to like run your own linting, our system will catch that too. And it can be annoying because, I mean, how long does it take your testing to run? If you were to run all the tests that you have automated, how long does that take?
Yeah, when we make a normal push, we're looking at 10, 15 minutes. When they make a push, we're waiting for it to report.
I mean, I had a system, the biggest application that I ever built was with the Innovations for Learning, in the sense of how many users it really had and how the data was all over the place. And it took about 12 to 13 minutes to run the whole test suite. And, in my mind, some of the tests were inefficient. I know this for a fact, but it didn't matter to me. Like when we get into the deployments, we're deploying once an hour at the very most. So I don't care about a 15-minute entire system test. But the person that took over for me, one of his first moves was he was so annoyed with the test suite running for 10 to 15 minutes. It was 10 minutes that he just like commented out like this humongous chunk of tests just so he could get past it. And that like he lost the entire dev team when he did that, because all of us were like, we built all those tests. That is our insurance against regressions in production. And because you have just come on board and you don't have the same level of patience we do, you just effectively try to delete all of our work on that side. And the truth is we could have broken up those tests into parallel tests that could have run on multiple CI servers. I mean, I guess the bigger point is once an app gets big, you start scaling your CI too. And you can, at one point we would send out a deployment, and I know the CI, it was Circle CI at that point. Circle CI would run 3 versions of the app against 3 different database. Like it would run 3 sets of tests all at the same time. So we went from 15 minutes to 7 minutes, I think, within a very short period of time. So you scale that too. But then you also get in and you realize, oh, I'm writing really an inefficient tests from a database perspective. Like read and writes to the database are usually the bigger time suck of a testing arrangement. And
Right.
so when the next person, that person didn't last very long, so then another person replaced him. And when that person came on board, they're like, why are all these tests commented out? And I'm like, oh, the previous guy hated it. And he was like, we're turning those all back on. And I'm like, I think you're going to be great for this job. So but it could be annoying too. Like if you come from a background with limited CI work and you don't see why 10 minutes is maybe not a big deal to deploy, then it could, I guess, be annoying. And I know I've heard people brag about we can run our whole test suite in 3 minutes, and I'm like, how big is your app? Like, how much time do you have to focus on efficient testing versus getting things done? Because in a way, the CI system is invisible to the rest of your business. Like they don't know anything you do about that kind of stuff. The accountants are always like, what is this charge for? And I'm like, for an integration server. And they're like, what's that? Like nobody in the business understands that, but the dev team really.
Well, and it is part of the development cost that does have to get explained every once in a while of why did this take so long, and this is working. What are we waiting for? And it's like, well, we're still writing the test for it. That's what. Which isn't TDD, but that's okay.
I don't really see a ton of bugs in apps anymore. Myself, like the apps that I use have a very high quality rank, I think. So to me, all of this whole continuous integration, multiple changes deployed, rapid deployments has led to a decade of really high quality software, very low bugs compared to most most products. Like I would say a couple of days ago, I used Xero for my accounting. And I clicked on a link to change a credit card that was being used. And the whole thing just went to crap when I clicked on the link. And within an hour, I got an email from them saying, hey, we noticed you got that bug. It's fixed. And I didn't reach out to them. I didn't say I got this bug. So that means that they had, reporting on production, your error management system is part of your integration as well, right? Because on my old app, I remember I had Honey Badger, or maybe what's the name of those? There's probably 5 or 6 different error tracking systems. But our error tracking system would tell us, by the way, this error just happened. Your user's got a blank screen. Usually we don't give them stack traces on error issues. But the bigger point is it would tell us this error occurred after this commit, after this deployment. So we could go, oh, wait, what changed? Like we could go and do a diff between where that error happened on the stack trace that we get and quickly track down what caused it. So to me, the error tracking on production is part of the CI process, like at the very end, in my mind. And that's why Xero knew I probably triggered an error, and they were able to track down, oh, this is the person that suffered because of it. And they just made a point to tell me. And it was fixed the next day. Like that type of, back in the old Windows XP Vista days, there was no such thing as deployments like that. At that kind of rapid timing.
No, not at all.
I mean, it's just unheard of. And now we get a Chrome update every 2 weeks on routine.
Yeah.
So for me, looking So I guess circling back, I don't have. I mean, any other ideas or thoughts on CI that you have right now?
No. I think we've hit everything that was important to talk about as far as continuous integration. Yeah, I don't
I mean,
have
I can.
anything
I
to add.
do. I guess the other points I'll make. Heroku has its own pipeline system now. I don't use their CI because
Sure,
it was always
sure.
very difficult to set up, and the cost is doesn't really it doesn't totally make sense what you're going to be end up paying for it. But I really like they have you can have a staging section, a production. You can have repos that are staging repo, production repo. You can also have pull request repos. So when someone on my team creates a pull request, Heroku fires up a temporary version of the app that you can test live before it even gets to staging. And then if you turn that PR and merge it into master, Heroku just shuts down the PR app because you don't need it anymore. It's been merged. And then
Right.
you have your new, like I use staging for testing with the end users all the time. I'm like, go to the staging site, and they all have it bookmarked now that they can go in and use staging to check out new features before they go to production. And the only thing I do on production is essentially it pushes the commits up to production, and it's done in a few minutes, like as long as a Heroku build takes. And if I needed to revert, I just say, hey, go back to the last commit on Heroku. So the where I've really seen it change the most is on going back to that whole CMS deployment, which was all FTP. That's the only way. Like when we worked in Drupal, what was you just use FTP for deployment, didn't you?
Oh yeah, you had to get the FTP address. Get the folder set up and send the code up to the
So
server. That's
we
all that
talked, and
was.
on this old app last episode, we talked about the managed hosting platforms of Pantheon and WordPress Engine. And I swear, excuse me, the nowadays I won't work on WordPress or Drupal unless I'm going to use one of those two managed hosting. And
Oh,
the
for
biggest
sure.
reason is
Yeah.
that they both have deployment staging systems that are amazing compared to what we had to deal with back in the day. And I like Pantheon's the best. They have a development site that you can work with. You push that up to a testing site or a testing stage, and then you can pull the database back from production into the testing environment. So it's essentially you're merging the changed code from development into the live data from production and test everything in the middle. And then when you're like, hey, this is good to go, you go back up to production and say, hey, copy the code over. Now it's it's still complex in that Drupal and WordPress still allow development to be stored in the database. So
Right.
you can build whole themes where all of the CSS is stored in the database. That's a problem when you try to do code pushes and stuff. Like you're not committing code to Git and to source control. But at the end of the day, the level of security I felt when I recently worked on a Drupal site again and deploying through Pantheon again, the continuous integration system that they have used on WP Engine and Pantheon are light years ahead of what we had to do back in the day. And all of a sudden, I was like, I kind of like working on this again. It wasn't it. The pain and fear
Yeah.
was no
Yeah.
longer there, and I could revert. I could go into if I screwed up on Pantheon, I could just revert back to the previous version from a few minutes ago with like a button click. I mean, that wasn't possible. Like that, I'd have to go through an FTP a bunch of crap and then test it again. So
Right.
I think that CI is by far the thing that stands out the most in my job search now. And it's by far what I love about development these days.
Yeah, and it's a complete sea change from from a decade ago for sure.
If you don't have it, either I will be empowered to install it, or I ain't working with you. Like it's gotta happen. Like I can't go back to the days of, like you said, push and pray. Like I can't do that. Like that's nerve wracking.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So that's all I got.
All right. Well, I think that's all we had for this week.
Talk to you next.
See you.
Thanks for listening to the CTO Think podcast. Show notes and previous episodes can be found on our website at ctothink.com. Reviews on Apple iTunes are always appreciated and help promote the show. Patreon contributions help us to produce episode transcripts, which allow people that are deaf or hard of hearing to access the show. If you have feedback, ideas, or want to be a guest, please email us at hello@ctothink.com. Show music is Dumpster Dive by Mark Wallach, licensed by premiumbeat.com. Voiceover work by meganvoices.com. You'll hear from us next week.